So actually, Amy's going to kick us off tonight.
So I'm Amy, and welcome everybody. The first thing I want to do is to just say that we'd like you to keep your cameras on, but remain muted. We'd just like to see everybody's faces if we could. Your questions are welcome. You can type them in the chat box or raise your virtual hand. Um, excuse me. If you experience any technical problems, you can give me a call. The number's on the screen right here. Um, The training is being recorded, so after the session, we're going to let everybody know send you all a link along with the slide deck that we're showing tonight. It'll be also posted on our website under webinar archives, but that's one of our locked pages. So if you haven't already signed up for access to our website, this is a reminder, you can do that. If you go to our website, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but if you have any questions or problems, just give me an email and I'll help you out with that. And then at the end of tonight, we'll have a QR code come up on the presentation. If you follow that, it'll take you to an evaluation. We're just asking you to just take a few minutes to fill that out. Your feedback really helps us improve this event each year. So thanks in advance. Are there any questions about the logistics tonight? So if not, let's move on. I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Director, Sue Staglowski. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Amy, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sue Saglowski. I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont School Boards Association, or for short, the VSBA. I joined the VSBA in 2018 as the Director of Legal and Policy Services, and I have been serving as the Executive Director since 2019. I have been a school board member myself. I used to serve on the Meadowy School District Board from 2005 to 2019. I also served on the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union Board. And even though that feels like a long time ago that I started my school board service, I recall very clearly what it was like to be a newly elected school board member. So I can empathize with many of you right now. On this slide, you will see what I do at the VSBA. These responsibilities are typical for an executive director of a nonprofit association. In terms of the second bullet, support to the VSBA board, I will be speaking more about the VSBA board, actually your board, because it consists of school board members from around the state, and what it does at our second session next week. So how can I help you? Well, I have a law degree, so I am happy to help you with questions of a legal nature, with the caveat that there is an attorney who works with each of your districts, and that is often the person that you're going to want to connect with. Sometimes in response to inquiries from school board members, though, I can provide some initial guidance, some initial information, and point you in the right direction where you can seek additional guidance or advice, whether that would be from your own attorney, meaning your district's attorney, or perhaps the Agency of Education or some other resource. I do not represent school boards, and therefore I cannot provide actual legal advice to your board on a specific situation. However, I am always happy to direct you to resources that can help you. And now I would like to take this opportunity to officially welcome you to our new member academy and just say a few words to place your role as a school board member into the larger context. I would also like to offer you some reassurance. Though school board member service may seem daunting to you right now, you will be okay. In fact, you will be better than okay. And how do I know this? Well, by the fact that you are here today, by taking time out of your busy lives to learn about the work of school boards in Vermont and your specific role in school governance, that is really all the proof that is needed. So first, a bit of a larger context in which to place your role as a school board member or director. Instead of giving primary responsibility of our children's education to the federal government, Our nation's founders intentionally entrusted state and local citizens with public education through democratically elected school board members. This American heritage is a gift that requires continued attention and improvement to work well. And this can only happen when state and local actors in public education commit themselves to the pursuit of excellence. When it comes to school board service, there is no one specific training, school, or pathway to help prepare you to do this work. But don't worry, that is what the VSBA is here for. We can help prepare you as you embark on this journey in educational governance, starting with this new member academy and throughout your tenure as a board member. I will be speaking about how we support our members through their services, through our services at the second session, which is next week on May 29th. And here comes the reassuring part of what I want to say today. Without even realizing it, each of you already bring to the table relevant knowledge, experience, and skills that will help you become an effective school board member. And what do I mean by that? Well, maybe you have participated in public service before, such as belonging to a community organization, a local club, or an association. Perhaps you have volunteered, held other elected offices, or served on other boards. I suspect, at the very least, all of you have engaged in civil discourse at work with coworkers and at home with family members. Each of these experiences has prepared you for school board service in one way or another. So be assured that you already have relevant experience and skills to serve on your school board. Keep that in mind, especially during the tougher times. And yes, there will be possibly some tough times. And yet, at the same time, school board service is different from other types of board service. For example, there isn't a whole lot of doing. Unlike other boards, you don't raise money, you don't hold fundraisers, and rarely will you organize an event. You are not expected to donate your own money to the district. Rather, it is a donation of your time that is required. Serving on a school board does take time, often a lot of time. It is more like a marathon than a sprint. It is complex and nuanced work. It can take more than a year before you would feel reasonably comfortable in your role, and that's normal. It becomes easier with an upfront investment of time to learn what your job is and, importantly, what it is not. And that is why you are here today, and that is why I have faith that you will all be excellent school board members. Congratulations on your recent election or appointment to your school board. And thank you very much for making the commitment to serve the students in your district as entrusted by your voters. It is a great honor to work with people who donate their most valuable resource, their time, to public education. I will see you again a little bit later in the presentation. And now I would like to hand it back to Amy Callan, Director of Operations, who will introduce herself.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Amy Callan. I'm the Director of Operations at VSBA. I joined the organization at the end of last year, November of last year. On the screen, you'll see some of the things that I'm responsible for doing at VSBA. You'll see that I wear a variety of hats. And then how can I help you? So if down the road you have a question and you can't remember which VSBA staff to direct it to, you're always welcome to start with me. I'm happy to answer your question or put you in touch with the right person who can help you. And then with that, I'm going to hand over to our next VSBA staff member, Debbie Singizer, who will introduce herself and take it from here. Debbie, you're muted.
What's wrong? Can't people read lips? Thank you. So I'm Debbie Singizer, and I joined the VSBA in 2023 as the Director of Board Services. In this role, I provide customized support to school boards. I also support cohorts of members, such as you, new board members, board chairs, as well as policy governance boards. So these are some of the things that I do. How can I help you? Well, a lot of my job is actually interfacing and communicating directly with school board members, which is the part of my job that I actually like the most. Um, Here are a few things that I do at the VSBA and the ways that I might be able to help you during your school board service. I myself am currently a school board member. The first time I ran for school board was in 2014, and I have served for a total of 8 years. I think I just started my ninth year, and many of those years I've been chair of my school board. We are a district, a unified union school district board, and we're part of a larger supervisory union. So that's who we are at the VSBA, at least some of us. You've met three-fourths of us. You'll meet hopefully the fourth staff member next week. But what we'd like to do is know a little bit more about who each one of you is. And what we've done is we've set up a 3-question survey, and there's different ways you can get into the survey. If you feel like typing that URL in your computer and going in that way, that's probably the hardest way to do it, but you're welcome to do that. You also can just open up a new window and do menti.com and use the code 531-65471, and that will also open up the survey. Or if you have a phone nearby and can turn and know how to use a QR code, just hover over that QR code and open up the yellow box that pops up, and that'll take you into the survey. And there's 3 questions on that survey. And if you have any problems at all, just raise your hand and we'll make sure to help you. Michelle, are you having a hard time getting in? Are you on your phone? That could be a little
Yeah.
tricky.
How can we help you, Ginger?
It is telling, somebody else said this in the chat. It's telling us to wait for the presenter to change slides to get to the next question.
Oh, interesting. Got it. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And go into, here we go. All right. So that's interesting. All right. Well, let me share my screen. So we'll take these questions one by one so you can go into the next one. So let me show you what I'm seeing here. Can you all see that? So 8 of you were elected and 2 were appointed. Okay, that's the results we got so far. Now, let's see if I change to the next page. Are you able to do it now?
Mine still says to please wait. You've already responded to this question. I don't know if
Debbie, is it perhaps that you're like in edit mode and you need to present it?
It was in present. There we go. All right, let's see if that works. Great. Tim gave me the thumbs up. I got some answers coming in. Why did you decide to serve? Accountability, service, transparency, change, giving back, engagement. People wanted me to. People twisted your arm. Little arm twisting happened there. Hopefully not. Hopefully people encouraged you to do it and you said, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Curiosity, great one. Policy interest, I'm a retired teacher. Awesome. Listening, serving comes up a bit, serving, service, engagement. So I don't know if you know what word clouds are about, but the answers that are given most frequently pop up in the middle and they're larger. So more people are putting in the word support, service, and engagement. It's community, yep, involved at the school. Yeah, these are all great reasons to run. Nobody's ran for the money, I guess, huh? All right, we'll go to the next one. There's one more. The final question is, what is one thing that you hope to learn during this academy? Anything and everything. Oh, I love that. We could just leave it there. How to be involved, responsibilities, responsibility of the job. Yep, expectations, open to new possibilities. Policy governance. Yeah, I know there's a couple of you here that are on policy governance boards. We'll touch on policy governance. Best practices. Potential upcoming changes. Oh boy, we could be here all day for that one. But yeah, there's a lot of things happening up in Montpelier right now. How to be effective. Great. Yeah, we'll touch on all this. We're probably going to spend most of the time on the responsibilities and responsibility of the job, how to be effective. You're going to hear the word effective quite a bit throughout the academy. Effective school boards, effective school board members. Yeah, driving engagement. That's definitely an important piece of what a school board does. So we'll talk about engagement actually tonight. Who is the VSBA? Yep, you're going to learn a lot about that. H454, well, I'm not sure we're going to have time to talk too much about it. We'll probably refer to it because there's so much happening and it's changing so rapidly. And we still don't know what the outcome is going to be. But I'd say stay tuned for that. All right. Well, thank you all very much for participating. That was great. I appreciate your willingness. I'm going to get back into the slide. Great. Let's move on. So here's our agenda for today. We got the preliminaries out of the way, the welcome and the introduction. So now we're going to move into the content of the evening. Throughout the evening, myself and Sue will make references to the essential work of the Vermont school boards, which I hope you all have a copy of. It's a book that looks like this. And you should have received a copy in the mail as part of your new member packet that we send out to newly elected and appointed school board members. If you didn't get a new member packet for some reason, it could be that we didn't know about your election, or that's probably the reason you wouldn't have received one. Just go ahead and put in the chat box your name. You don't have to share your mailing address with everybody, but if you'd like to just put in your name so Amy can take a note of it, And then she can contact the central office to get your mailing address and get you one of those the packets to you right away. And if you don't have the book handy tonight, it's not a big deal. I'm going to give you page references as we move, so you can just take note of the pages and go back to the book later. So let's begin with a little bit about education law in Vermont. Throughout your school board service, you will likely refer to Vermont education law quite frequently. The law is all enshrined in the Vermont Education Law Book, which you may not have a copy of, and that's okay, but hopefully either your board chair has a copy of the law book, or I know your superintendents all have a copy of this book. So in the Vermont Education Law Book, this is where you'll find all the education laws. This law book is updated every year. So let's talk about the different players and the rules that they have in in education law. So first we have the legislature. In the legislature, there are education committees both in the House and in the Senate. They introduce bills that may eventually become law if approved by both chambers. Then we have the courts. The courts interpret the laws relative to the Vermont State Constitution when laws are contested. And next we have the governor. The governor executes the laws along with the State Board of Education, which is a 10-person body that is appointed by the governor. And finally, we have the Agency of Education, or the AOE, and they oversee Vermont's education system and provide support to school districts to carry out the work of public education, which we will see a little bit more about this work on the next slide. So for more information about these different players and what they do, I would refer you to pages 5 and 6 of the Essential Workbook. So let's take a look at educational governance in Vermont, and more specifically, where we as school board members fall in. The state has ultimate responsibility for ensuring that, quote, all students receive substantially equal access to a quality education. This responsibility is enshrined in the Vermont Constitution and is more fully described in Vermont state statute. So to fulfill this important responsibility of ensuring that all students receive substantially equal access to a quality education, the state delegates a lot of the authority to school districts, supervisory unions, supervisory districts, and individual school districts. The role of the education of education is to lead, support, and provide oversight. Pictured here is a three-legged stool representing the work that the AOE does. We know from the previous slide that the AOE carries out the education work in accordance with the law, and as such, it is charged with oversight of Vermont's education system. So that is the first of its three main roles. The other two roles, leadership and support, is provided to the local school districts. In Vermont's educational governance system, there are three different types of legal entities, which you see here on the screen: school districts, supervisory unions, and supervisory districts. These entities are all governed by boards. It's important that you know which type of board that you serve on. Is your district part of a supervisory union? And if so, are you serving on both the school district board as well as the supervisory union board? Or if your district is called a supervisory district, then you would just have one board, and that's where all your members would be sitting. So the description of these three types of legal entities and their boards are again covered in that big green book I held up a little bit ago in the education law book. What I'd like you to do right now is in the chat box, just type in if you are serving on a school district board, a supervisory union board, excuse me, or both. Or maybe you just don't know, and that's fine as well, because it's quite confusing at the beginning. So we have a school district and supervisory, school district, yep. School district board, school district and supervisory union. Wow, Linda, they threw you right in, didn't they? School district, yep. So most of you are serving on school district. Somebody has their AI on, but I just declined it. I'm not sure what that is. Good. All right, we'll move on. Let's move on to the state level. There are currently 56 supervisory unions or supervisory districts and 122 school districts in Vermont. Remember that each legal entity is governed by a board. There is a total of somewhere between 850 and 900 school board members across the state of Vermont that are serving on all of these boards. In terms of students, in case you don't know, in 2023, our state enrolled a little bit more than 83,000 students. So if you do the math, you won't be surprised to see what a low student to board member ratio we have in Vermont. In fact, we have one of the lowest, maybe even the lowest student to board member ratios in the country. School districts range in size from around 30 students, just 30 students, to upwards of close to 5,000. This map, which is done by the Agency of Education, illustrates the different supervisory unions and school districts inside each of these, as well as the supervisory districts themselves. You can see how many different districts there are. So as you saw from the map, the administrative units are numerous and many are relatively small, both in terms of number of students and geographical size, especially compared with other states. There is also a high degree of local control over education in our state. As a result of this principle of local control, there is much variation among school districts and by extension, the boards that govern these districts. No two school boards in Vermont look the same. So let's take a look at some examples of how boards differ. Here on this slide, you will see the variety of titles used for school board members. Some boards will say school director when they refer to school board members. Some will say school board member. Sometimes you might hear the term trustee, but they basically, you are all of these three things. They're just, these terms are used interchangeably. Another variation on boards is the types of officers that sit on them. So by law, a chair and a clerk are required of each school board must have a chair and a clerk at the minimum. However, some boards may also choose to have a vice chair or even a secretary, or sometimes both. So think about what your board has in terms of the titles that you're using to describe yourselves. Are you a school director? Are you a school board member? And also which officers sit on your board. Let's go back to the chat. And in the chat box, I'm curious to see how many officers your board has. My board has 2 officers. We have the minimum. We have a chair and a clerk, and that's it. So we would have 2 officers. I'm curious to see how many of your boards have more than 2. Chair and a clerk, chair and a clerk. Okay. Two, 11, 3, I think. Okay. 3. Not sure, just appointed. That's fair. You'll find out. 3. Okay. Yeah, that position, oh, here's another one that came in, not sure. The position of clerk on our board serves as kind of a de facto vice chair, so that in the absence of the chair, is who would step up. Some boards will have a vice chair, and the vice chair will step up when the chair is not available. Great. Another difference among boards in Vermont is the governance model that they use. These are three of the most common governance models: results-based governance, policy governance, and traditional good governance. And there are some other governance models that boards may use. So I hope by now, except for those of you who are just appointed, you may not know if you haven't attended your first meeting or done any new member orientation, but I hope you'll know very soon what type of governance model your board uses. And if you don't, then it's important to ask, because it's important that you learn as much about the model that you're using. Another variation is the frequency of regular board meetings. Some boards meet once per month, others might meet twice a month. Just, you don't have to put anything in the chat, but hold up your hands if you can. I'd love to see how many meetings a month you have. 1, 2, 2. I'm sorry for those of you who have 2. 1, okay, 1. Okay, so see, there's a lot of variation in terms of even the number of more regular board meetings that that each board has. Board committees. Some boards have committees and some don't. Those that do have committees will have different ones for different reasons. Again, very little uniformity and lots of variation. So here are a list of possible committees that your board may have. And I do want to point out one that I should have put up there, which is a superintendent evaluation committee. That should be up there as well. Again, in the chat box, if you don't mind, can you indicate if you have board committees and how many you have? You don't have to give me the titles, but just I'm curious to know if your board has committees. We don't have any committees on my board because we're a small board of 5. So we just don't think it's kind of hard to have board committees with that few numbers. 2 or 3 committees. Okay. Academic excellence and budget and facilities. Yeah. No committees. Close to a dozen. Good Lord. That's a lot of committees. Larry says 4. Yeah. So again, you can see how different boards, how the variety, the variation among boards across the state. Board elections. Even board elections, that is when voters elect their school directors and vote on an annual budget, they occur at different times in Vermont. They tend to all happen in late winter and spring, starting around town meeting day in early March and running through mid-May. In fact, the last board election was just last week. This highly diversified system of governance translates into differences among districts in terms of the way that they deliver education to their students. For example, there is no statewide school calendar at the moment and no statewide curriculum at the moment. Those are issues that are being discussed this term in the legislature, as you may be aware of. Also, there's no statewide teacher contract and no statewide para or bus driver contract. Each supervisory union or supervisory district has its own contracts that are negotiated between the board and the local teachers and para driver associations. So in sum, there is a very high degree of localized control in Vermont education, as you can see. I'm not saying that this is a good thing, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I think it's just worth noting. And as you serve, you will see both the challenges and the opportunities that this local control provides. So I just want to pause here for a second and see if anybody has any questions about that concept or that principle of local control in Vermont.
I think I saw a question about committees, Debbie.
Great.
It
Was
was, the question was, we have a small group looking into something. Is that a committee?
I'm going to answer that. Actually, if that, I'll give you a very brief answer, but it's a longer discussion that is worth having. A committee is formed by the full board. And in order to form a board committee, there are certain things that have to be done. It can't just be a group of people that say, we are a committee. If this is truly a board committee at a board meeting, the board has to take the decision to create a committee. And there's certain tasks that a board should do in terms of defining the charge of the committee, who's on the committee, when it's going to meet, when it's going to dissolve. You want to make sure there's an end date. So it really depends on how the group was created. It should be official, and it should not just be a group of board members that kind of declare themselves a committee. I hope that answers the question. Okay. I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to move on.
Oh, I think one just popped up.
Okay. Are there committees that have no end date ongoing? I think you might see that as a practice, but the advice I would give is that for those committees that don't have an end date is at your reorganization meeting. It's always a good idea as a board to look at what committees you have and to decide if you want to, I don't know what the term is, like reaffirm it for another year. And so it shouldn't just be a committee that it exists in perpetuity. It should be deliberate. So if you get to that reorganization meeting, it's a good idea to take a look at the committees you have and the board should ask itself, should we still have this committee? Is there still a role for this committee? Yep. Yep. Committees do have to follow open meeting law when they meet. Yep, definitely. And is a committee a way to avoid a conflict with open meetings? And should committees report at the board meeting? I don't know what that means. Is a committee a way to avoid a conflict with open meeting law? I mean, committees are officially part of the board, so therefore it must comply with open meeting law. So just like the board has to warn its meetings, record, a committee has to do the same. And then whether they have to report out at the board meeting, that depends on the board. Yes, but it really is up to the board to decide how often the committee needs to report back to it. So let me give you an example. There is, for a superintendent evaluation committee, that is a good example of a committee that just exists for a finite amount of time. It's during possibly two to 4 months when the board is evaluating its superintendent, and the committee will meet. And then once the superintendent evaluation is finished, then it will report to the whole board about the superintendent evaluation, the results of it. And then it will dissolve.
It's also important to note that committees only have the authority. You said this already, Debbie, but I just wanted to emphasize committees only have the authority that the board gives them. And most of the time, if not all of the time with school board committees, they are not able to make any kind of final decision on anything. They do the work and they bring it back to the board with a recommendation, and the board makes the final decision.
That is an important point. They really serve in an advisory capacity, and sometimes what will happen is that the board will end up doing the work that the committee has already done, and that's not effective. So really, it's important if you have a committee that the board lets the committee do its work, and not empower the committee to do its work and not like undo or do again all the work that the committee has done. Those are great questions. Committees are a little tricky. So let's move on. Governance. This is an important term in school board work. And it's a term that we may have even used tonight already. You may have heard it actually before tonight in the context of national and state government. It's a term that's used a lot, but it's not often defined. So what is governance? Well, we might have a general sense of it, but in this context of our work as school board members, it's really important to understand what it means. So I'm going to ask you again to go and to a survey. It's a 1-question survey. It's basically asking you, what do you think governance is? And these are the 3 ways you can get into that survey. Can you see my screen? It says that it's paused. My screen sharing's paused.
We're just seeing the slide deck right now. We're not seeing Menti.
Oh, you're not? Okay. There. Okay, so here's some definitions or synonyms that people have come up with governance. Oversight seems to be the biggest one. Rules and policy, yeah. Staying out of procedures, guidance, leadership, making decisions, policies, policy comes up quite a bit. Monitoring, setting the direction. Ooh, hold on to that one in your head. Setting direction, representation, accountability, deciding. Yep. Great. Okay. So actually, I'm going to go back one slide. Governance is a Greek word, and it literally means in Greek to steer or steering, as in steering a ship. Governance is about setting the direction, which I saw in the word cloud, setting the direction of an organization and ensuring that the organization is always on its course. So governance helps an organization, in our case, in the context of education, our school district, and what it helps our district determine what is the destination that it's steering itself towards. And this is something that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But basically, what we're steering towards is something we call the vision of the school district. So I offer a couple of different ideas or definitions of governance. John Carver, who's the father of policy governance, says that governance exists in order to translate the wishes of an organization's owners into organizational performance. If you're a policy governance board, I'm sure you're familiar with John Carver and the system of governance. But the words that are highlighted in red, I think, are the key words of this definition: the wishes of an organization's owners and organizational performance. Another definition I want to propose is just one taken from the dictionary, and that is the act or process of governing or overseeing the control and direction of something such as a country or an organization. So those are just a couple of ways to think about what governance means. The definitions have some things in common, such as this idea, again, of steering or moving in a certain direction. But let's get a little bit more specific for our purposes as school board members. Let's get a little more granular and drill down a bit. Sometimes people conflate governance with management or use the two words interchangeably. But governing and management are actually two very different functions that carry different responsibilities, and they are both essential to school districts. First, we have governance. As we know, governance means steering, in our case, the school district, towards something. And what is it steering towards? It's steering towards its vision. Or in the case of a policy governance board, you might have heard the term ends policy. Governance is a process where the direction of the organization is set, and some will call this the strategic direction or the strategic vision. Governance is about about being accountable to someone that's external to the organization, or in the case of school board governance, it's our voters, it's our community members. Governance also provides a framework for decision making. On the right side of the screen, we have the term management. Managing is taking care of the day-to-day business of the organization. It has everything to do with the operations of the district. It's really about the planning and the implementation of how things get done. It's actually, the word management is a Latin word that means hand. So if anybody speaks French or Spanish, that you would probably recognize the word hand in this word management. We as board members need to be clear in our minds about the difference between these two roles, governance and management, and understand who is responsible for what. So simply stated, the boards are responsible for the governance of the district. This is the why and the what, whereas the superintendent is responsible for the management, the how things get done. Another catchy way to think of this, and something that I often say when I do board training, is this interesting quote that boards assure that schools are well run, but they don't run them. So boards assure that schools are well run, but they don't run them. Effective boards focus on the governance and leaves the management to the superintendent. And when there is clarity around and deep understanding of the respective roles and responsibilities, the board and the superintendent, can work in partnership to help steer the district towards the vision and meeting its goals. So any questions before I move on about this idea of governance and what it means and how it's different from management? It's nuanced, but it's important. And it's really key to school board governance. Great. So here's another way to look at the difference of roles between the board and the superintendent. How many school board members do you think it takes to screw in a light bulb? Show me your hands. How many do you think it takes? Ideally. Well, the answer is none. It's up to the board to say, let there be light. In this cartoon, it illustrates the role of the board and the superintendent in kind of a silly way, screwing in a light bulb. School boards are responsible for articulating the why. Why do we even need light? In the public education context, why does our school district exist? How do we know the answer to this question? Well, from our community members, or the owners, as we say in policy governance. What is it that they wish to see? We will talk about how we figure out what the community wishes to see a little bit when we start talking about community engagement. So once we have a vision in place, the one that the board created based on the wishes of the community, the board then steps back and empowers the superintendent to decide how to reach the vision. So in this cartoon example, the vision is that we want to have light. That's what the board has said. We would like to have light. The superintendent then figures out which light bulb will be used to provide that light. And obviously, the superintendent doesn't do this work single-handedly, but rather they have the authority to delegate some of that work to others in the district. The superintendent has their own administrative team, which is comprised of principals and administrators to whom the work is delegated. So now that we understand this first big concept, that the board's work is responsible for governing the district or steering it, the next question is how? How do we steer the district? How do board members do this work? How do we keep our district on course? So the board's job is to provide this vision and direction. And that again is keeping the district moving towards its vision in partnership with the superintendent while simultaneously providing strong oversight of public education. The school board is ultimately responsible for the successful and effective management of the district. We have ultimate responsibility that our school district is effective. But you might ask yourself, how can we as board members be responsible for something that isn't our role or our job? Well, we don't do the job of managing, remember? That's the superintendent's role. Instead, we delegate the management to the superintendent, who then in turn delegates the work as they see fit through the administrative team. So clarity is kind. And in school board governance, it's mandatory. We need to provide clarity to the superintendent. How do we do this? Well, we do this through the vision, the policies, the parameters, and the priorities of the district. And then once we do this, we get out of the way. We allow or permit the superintendent the flexibility to lead, to manage, and to operate the school system and to use their skills and creativity. This is their job, and this is what they are hired to do and what they are paid for. So as trustees, acting on behalf of our community, the board's job is one of oversight, and we are sure that three things happen. We set the vision, expectations, and goals to ensure that every student in the district has access to a high-quality education. We make sure that the taxpayer is getting a good return on their investment, and we enable the system to operate efficiently, effectively, and ethically. And I just want to pause, and I see there's some questions in the chat box, which I'm willing to take in just a minute, but I just want to spend a minute on this word trustees. I think this is a really important word for us to understand because board members in Vermont serve as trustees on behalf of the community. So what is a trustee? Well, a trustee has a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interest of the organization, which again, in our case, is our school district. Trustees are often appointed or elected. In our case, we're elected, but we can be appointed if there's a vacancy on the board. And we are elected to oversee the overall direction of the organization, in our case, the school district. And the trustees are expected to make decisions that align with the mission and the goals of the school district, considering the long-term sustainability and well-being of the organization. And ultimately, trustees are accountable for the outcomes of their decisions. So being a trustee is somewhat different from being a representative. Sometimes people think of school board members as representatives. A representative is similar to a trustee. A representative is someone who is also elected, right? Like our senators and our representatives in the House. However, typically a representative serves as a voice for a particular constituency or a group. Representatives will often advocate for the interests or concerns and perspectives of their constituents in decision-making processes. And representatives are typically not entrusted with fiduciary responsibilities. So our role as school board members is really more similar to that of a trustee than a representative, because we are entrusted by our communities to act on behalf of them, the community, to ensure that our students are getting the best education and that our district is thriving. So we're not really representing people in our community. We're listening to their concerns and we're taking their concerns and their ideas seriously. But at the end of the day, we are entrusted to do what's best for our school districts. Let's take some questions. If the trustees are accountable, should we have insurance? Sue, can you answer that question about insurance? It's a good one.
Yes, sure. Districts do hold insurance on their board members as trustees. So your district should have that covered for you.
Yep.
It's actually legally required to do that.
Correct. Here's a question. What happens when the district isn't meeting the goal? Does the board have a role in identifying that and making a change? Is the board's role to just make a change and then continue to identify if it is not met? What happens? So, yeah, so this will, might put that question on hold because this touches on one of the pillars that we will get to in next week's session, which is about monitoring progress. And yes, we as a board are responsible for monitoring progress of the school district in achieving its goals and ultimately moving closer to the vision. And if that's not happening, then yes, it's part of our responsibility to figure out why it's not happening and to make a change. And we have levers which we can take advantage of, such as the superintendent themselves. We evaluate the superintendent because the superintendent is responsible for the management of the whole district. So that's one lever. We also have fiduciary responsibilities in setting the budget, right? So that's another lever. So it really kind of gets to the root of why are we not meeting the goals and figuring out why that's happening and what can we as a board do to help ensure that the goals are being met. I don't know what this question means exactly, which comes first, the governance or the management. I mean, they're happening simultaneously. So there's no sequencing or prioritization. They both have to happen concurrently. And that's why this superintendent board partnership is so key. The two need to be working hand in hand because the governance and the management roles are different, but they need to be, they complement each other.
Can I just add to that a little bit, Debbie?
Yes,
The
please.
the only employee that the board is responsible for hiring is the superintendent. So
Right.
from the standpoint of you know, how this all comes to be, the board is the entity that hires the superintendent.
Correct. Yep. So this question's a good one, and I'm not sure I totally grasp it. What is the scope? Not sure if that's the right word, of the board's vision in relation to state and federal scope. Well, we're going to talk about vision next. So let's, Larry, put that on hold and then ask me that question again if you're still wondering about this, because the vision, as you will see, really reflects the wishes of the community, not so much the state and federal level. Of course, there are state and federal laws that have to be respected and followed. But in terms of the vision, which is what we're going to get to next, it's really, that is the community's vision for the district. I think that's it for questions right now. So I'm going to move on, but those were great questions. So this is a picture of the book that you have or will have soon, hopefully. And this is basically the table of contents. We will, one piece of advice I have in terms of how to use this book is it's not the kind of thing you want to read cover to cover, although you may wish to. It's rather a good resource to have on hand to take with you to school board meetings, or when you're preparing for a school board meeting and you have a question, it's hopefully something that you can turn to find an answer. So what, as I said, you're seeing on the screen is the table of contents of the essential work of Vermont school boards. And for the purposes of our academy, we are really going to be focusing on chapter 3, which is effective education governance, and look at what we refer to as the 6 domains or pillars of governance. So now we're getting even more granular. We're getting into the how we as school boards do our work. So before we dive into the pillars, I just want to say something quickly about educational equity. Educational equity is the forefront of everything that we do at the VSBA. And we love this graphic from the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation because it shows quite clearly what happens when you give everyone the same resource to get where they need to go, which is what's represented at the top. So if you give everybody the same size, the same model bicycle, then obviously some are going to get towards their destination and others are not at all, or some are going to be struggling quite a bit. Whereas if you give people the resources, or each individual the resource that is right for them, which is the bottom image, they're going to have much more opportunity and likelihood of reaching their destination. So when educational leaders focus on equity, which is providing each student with what they need to thrive, the likelihood of that's a new word, positive and equitable outcomes increases significantly. So for more information about educational equity, be sure to visit our website. We have a whole page devoted to equity, and it provides many different resources. And also chapter 2 of the book is all about educational equity. So what you see on the screen, I'm going to mute. Okay, there we go. Is the way that the VSBA has developed is the way that we categorize the multifaceted governance work of Vermont school boards. All of these domains are equally important and influential in the success of school districts in achieving its goals. So here we see the 6 pillars or main roles of the school board. Today, for the rest of this evening, we will be focusing on pillars 1, 2, and 3, which are on the left side of the screen. And then next week, we will focus on the ones on the right side. So let's begin with pillar 1, and that's engage the community and establish a vision. So hopefully this will get to your question, Larry. Seeing the forest for the trees. In school board governance, it's essential for board members to focus on the long-term educational objectives, student achievement, and overall district improvement. It's important that we not get bogged down by individual complaints, administrative procedures, and the short-term concerns. By seeing the forest for the trees or focusing on the big picture, board members can help make informed decisions that align with the broader mission and the vision of the school district. This in turn helps to ensure that their actions contribute to the overall success and well-being of our students, teachers, and community. Another way to look at our role as school board members is the balcony metaphor. So imagine standing on a balcony overlooking a scene below, and from this vantage point, you can see the entire landscape rather than seeing specific elements. So for example, the individual trees. Similarly, having a balcony view in school board governance means that you're able to see the overall goals, objectives, and challenges facing the school district and making your decisions with these in mind. Often you'll hear people refer to the school board position as being at the 30,000-foot view. And this is the place where we should be functioning. And it's just another way to keep in mind what our governance role is. So creating a shared vision. We have already spoken about a district's vision in the context of the board's governance responsibility. A vision provides us with a blueprint, or as some boards will call it, a North Star. And we want to be sure that the vision for the school district is informed by what the community wants. A vision should be future-oriented and results-focused. It should answer these questions. Why are we here? Why does the district exist? What difference do we want the district to make? And for whom? Vision statements tend to be aspirational, where we want to get to, with a results or outcome focus. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I wrote this vision statement for our new member academy when I first started planning for it. Whenever I start something new, like a new program, I like to first articulate the why. Why do we even need this? And what is the difference that it will make to the people that we're trying to support? So the words that are in red font should answer the 3 essential questions that you saw on the screen before. The why does it exist? What difference does it want to make, and for whom? So I'll give you a minute to read the vision statement and see if you can figure out which one answers which question, the why, the difference, and for whom. Is it clear? Just trying to see people's facial expressions. Is it clear? So the why is to empower new members to effectively and ethically govern. The what difference this academy is trying to make is to serve so that you can serve our communities and benefit our students. And the for whom The academy is for the newly elected and appointed board members. I'm now going to show you the example, a real example from a Vermont school district. So this is my board, this is my district's vision. And since we're a policy governance board, we call this our ends policy statement. So the Barstow Unified Union School District exists so that all enrolled students are empowered with the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed to be successful and contributing citizens of a global society by way of the resources invested by the communities. Hopefully, your districts all have a written vision statement that is easily found on your website. Let me see what time it is. I'm not going to have you do an exercise, but what I'd like you to do at some point after we log off tonight, or at some point when you have a couple minutes, is I'm curious, if you go to your websites for your school districts, how easy is it for you to find your vision statements? It should be fairly easy. And if it's hard to find, if you have a hard time finding it, you can imagine that anybody who's new to your website and to your districts is going to have a hard time to find it. So it might be something you want to mention to your board chair or your superintendent. So it's important as school board members that we understand what our vision statements mean. Because remember, this is our North Star. And we should be able to articulate to ourselves and to our community members, what is this difference that we are trying to make, for whom? And so it's important that those vision statements answer those three questions. So now we're going to bring in the community engagement part of this. The board is in the strongest position whenever it is engaged with its community. The board should develop structured and ongoing opportunities for the community to define and refine the vision for the school district. And the book has many suggestions of how you can engage with your community. So once your vision is in place, the board then takes on the responsibility for monitoring the progress and making the policy and budgetary decisions to achieve the vision. And to keep the community engaged in the ongoing work of the district, including both successes and challenges, the board must seek ways to interact with community stakeholders in a variety of settings and contexts. So one of the most obvious times when community engagement happens is around budget season, right? This is the time when we're drafting our budgets and we're proposing them to our communities. And we usually do this at our annual district meeting. And we're presenting our draft budgets and we're asking for the following fiscal year, and we're informing our registered voters about the budget and why the board has approved it. But we should actually be engaging with the community all the time. It should be happening 11 or 12 months out of the year. Because remember, the board is always in its strongest position when it is engaged with its community. So that brings us to the end of that first pillar.
Debbie, I have a
Vision
couple
and-
of vision questions.
Yeah, tell me what they, here, I can open them.
You ready?
Which, yes, is it important that it is measurable? The vision, I think, yes. So the vision is aspirational, and I would say that it might be tricky to measure, but what shouldn't be tricky to measure and what should be measurable are the goals, the strategic goals that the district sets for itself to help it move towards the vision. So each year, the district should have a number of goals, and the goals might be for 1 year, it might be for multiple years. And those goals should definitely be measurable, and there are means to helping the district achieve its overall vision. A clear vision is key to the board's governance, so I feel that stating the vision would be a great way to start the monthly meetings once everyone sits down after the Pledge of Allegiance. No, Linda, that is not too much or a bad idea. That is an amazing idea. In fact, I insist that before we start our meetings, right after we say the Pledge of Allegiance, a board member will read our end statement. And we do that because, and it's also on everything that we send out. We have it on our board agendas. We have it on our district warnings. We put it on our email signatures. I mean, we really try to push out the end statement, which is, as I said, that's a policy governance term, but for a traditional governance board, you'd say vision statement. We really try to push that vision statement out as much as possible and make it as visible as possible so that the community knows what it is. Yep. Yep. So that brings us to the end of Pillar 1, engaging the community and establishing a vision. We're going to move on to adopting policy, which I'm going to ask Sue Siglowski to walk us through. Sue has a lot of experience working with policy and lots of expertise.
Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about what board policies are. And before we do that, I would just note that 16 VSA 563, Section 563, contains all the duties of school boards, and policy is the very first one that's listed. So it's an important part of the school board's responsibilities. Board policies describe what should be done to achieve the district's vision, which we just talked about the vision, and are written as a broad statement of intent. And procedures or interpretations of how it should be done are operational, and those are left to the administration. You'll often see policies that require the superintendent to develop procedures to go along with the policies. Mm-hmm. Answering the question of how well we're doing it is also the board's responsibility. So we're going to be discussing next week what this monitoring role looks like when we look at Pillar 5, which is monitor progress, because boards do look at how well they're doing as far as complying with their procedure or their policies. I would suggest it would be a really good idea for you to spend some time getting to know your district's policies. There are probably many of them because the Vermont legislature and the U.S. Congress have developed several laws that require school boards to have policies. So there are many that you're required to have by law. For more ideas about policy, VSBA has a model policy manual under the resources tab on our website. I would encourage you to take a look at that. It is divided into 3 sections. It's the required section, which I just spoke about. Those are the ones that are required by law. And then there's recommended policies. And then we have some that we call to be considered. So take a look at the model policy manual. It's a very important resource that we provide to our members, and we work very hard to keep it up to date. At the end of each legislative session, first of all, we produce a very comprehensive legislative report, which you'll be receiving. Most of the time, there's changes to the law that require changes to model policies, and we'll make those changes. And then we will inform you through our weekly update email that those changes have been made or that a new policy has been issued, a new model policy. And then that is your signal for if you have a policy committee or if your board does it all itself to do that work on your own policy manual. Are there any questions about the policy work of the board? I mean, this is actually a really big topic that we could do an entire webinar on. So this is just a very short introduction for you. And it would be a great idea to take a look at our webinar archive and look up a webinar that's specifically about policy to get more in depth. If there aren't any questions, I'll hand it back to you, Debbie.
Great. I think actually, Sue, we have a webinar coming up on policy sometime this year, before the end of the year. I think we have one scheduled. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think one
There's a
question just popped
question.
up. How to
Yeah.
monitor policy. There you go.
Yes, how to monitor policy. So that is something that school boards will often include on their work plan. And that is a plan of how the board is going to do its work throughout the year. And they will add, it's set out by month, and the plan will show what the board's going to do at each meeting. And that way you can be able to take a look at whatever policies you're going to be monitoring that month. And there are various ways that you can monitor them. Oftentimes it will be through a report that the superintendent gives to the board with either data or other type of information that shows how the policy is being implemented.
Mhm.
Do you have anything to add to that, Debbie, about how your board does it? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, what you said is exactly right. For policy governance board, policy monitoring is really one of the three key roles that our board plays. And we have, as part of our work plan, as you said, Sue, our annual work plan, we actually map out the monitoring schedule. So we know exactly which policies are going to be monitored at which meeting. It just keeps us on track. And we monitor all of our policies every year. So again, that's a little bit different from a traditional governance board, which that may not be possible. In fact, Sue, don't we recommend that boards monitor or review their policies, I guess, every 3 to 5 years, which is something a little bit different, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's to make sure that they're updated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That they're still accurate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about monitoring next week when we get to that monitoring progress. So we're in the home stretch, folks. We're on that third pillar, board and superintendent partnership. So this is really one of the most misunderstood aspects of the school board's role in it's this relationship between the superintendent, or as they are frequently called, the CEO of the school district. The relationship between a CEO, superintendent, and the board should really be one of partnership. It is essential that this relationship is one that is based on mutual trust and respect. The tone and rhetoric that are set at the board level often trickles down and impacts the rest of the district. So as Sue mentioned earlier, it's really important to keep in mind that the one and only direct report to the board is the superintendent. And as such, they get their authority from the board and are in turn accountable to the board. So we will see how this works in a few minutes. It is really hard to overemphasize the importance of this pillar. In research that was done by the National School Boards Association, one of the 8 characteristics of effective school boards was identified as, quote, school boards that lead as a united team with the superintendent, each from their respective roles, with strong collaboration and mutual trust. The research went on to say that school board effectiveness hinges upon a strong board superintendent relationship, while superintendent effectiveness and longevity hinges upon a strong board superintendent relationship. So the two relationships are really mutually reinforcing and beneficial. As we know by now, the board's work is to engage with the community and set the vision and goals for the district. And then the board steps out of the way of the CEO, who has the knowledge and the experience needed to ensure that the progress is made towards the vision. As we saw earlier, also, the superintendent is responsible for managing the district and the day-to-day operations. The board stays in its governance lane, and the superintendent stays in their management lane. And remember, I said before, and I'll say it again, that clarity is both kind and essential. Therefore, the board needs to ensure that they provide clear priorities to the superintendent. And that could be something like annual goals that are set with the superintendent each year. So to review, the board sets the vision with the community's input, and in partnership with the superintendent determines the goals to help move the district in that direction towards the vision. In order for this to work, there must be a good, healthy relationship with the superintendent, ideally in the form of collaboration and partnership. The superintendent's role is defined in Vermont statute as being the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the district or supervisory union, and all of its member districts. They are responsible for all the operations and providing educational leadership. And then below the superintendent, we have the principals. The principal provides instructional leadership and manages the day-to-day school operations. Accountable to the superintendent, not to the board, and the principal is accountable to the superintendent, not to the board, and they get their direction from the action plans, priorities, and initiatives created at the supervisory union or district level. And this is all set out and described in greater detail in the Vermont AOE's guidance document that's called Roles and Responsibilities in Vermont School Systems. And when you get a copy of this slide deck, you'll see that this is a hyperlink, and it'll take you into that document where you can see more. So to employ a well-qualified and capable superintendent, a board needs to be able to assure mutual accountability between the board and the superintendent. Remember, the board is accountable to provide clear direction and set priorities for the superintendent. And then the superintendent is accountable to deliver on the priorities. It is important to have this image in your mind because it will help you when you start getting questions, sometimes complaints, requests from community members. So the chain of communication actually is very much the same as that of authority and accountability. And this is hopefully something that your own chair and superintendent will be talking to you about, of how you handle a complaint from or a question from a community member. It's really important to keep this hierarchy in mind. So we are at 7:32. So I'm going to not do this exercise with you. I'm going to skip over the questions slide for a very quick minute, because I know some of you probably want to go and get off the call. But I am willing to stay on, and I think Sue is as well, to answer any questions that you might still have. And but before I close officially, I just want to remind you that next Thursday, May 29th, is when we'll have our second session. And like this session, it will be recorded. So if you have a board meeting or a conflict next Thursday and you can't attend live, you will be able to see the presentation. And I also would like to ask you to take a picture of the QR code. This is a SurveyMonkey form, which is a little different from what we were doing before. But if you have a camera nearby and you can just take a picture of the QR code to do a survey for tonight, that would be most appreciated, because we really do take your feedback and comments into consideration when we do the member, whenever we plan for the new member academy. It really helps us a lot. So I'm going to leave that up there for a minute or two so you have a chance to copy it. But officially say goodnight to those who would like to get off. And for those who'd like to stay on and ask additional questions, I want to honor that you probably had some questions that maybe you didn't get to ask. So I'm happy to stay on and chat for a few minutes. So good night to those who are getting off, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thanks for coming.